Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Gaylord National Harbor Convention Center, where we're covering the Air Force Association's annual Air, Space, and Cyber Conference and Trade Show. Our coverage here is sponsored by L3 Technologies and Leonardo DRS, and we have with us Lieutenant General Scott Rice, who is the Director of the Air National Guard, former Adjutant General of the Guard of the great state, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
I'm sorry for that. Sir, thanks very much for taking time with us today.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for having me talk to you all, because there's a lot of exciting things going on right now.
Absolutely. I wanted to start with the hurricanes, Guard playing a critical role in that. We were over at the Bureau just very recently. We've also talked to the Army Corps of Engineers. From your standpoint, just today, Puerto Rico did get hit by Hurricane Maria. Talk to us a little bit about what the Guard's doing, positioning itself, not just for the immediate aftermath, but in the weeks to come, and how you guys are going to be supporting folks.
Well, in pre-hurricane, we did a lot of work evacuating non-essential personnel and leaving the essential personnel hunkered down. And now that the hurricane is in full swing over Puerto Rico, it just went through today over St. Croix and the Virgin Islands, and we're just getting ready, just getting our initial assessments on how bad this is. This is one of the top 10 hurricanes of our century. This is really devastating.
And what is the kind of support that the Air National Guard brings to bear, aside from, for example, the obvious, which are lift assets?
Well, lift assets also brings in a lot of things like sustainment, getting people water, food, basic energy, getting the power grid up, but also giving people the ability to say, boy, this is a disaster. I need to get out of here. We can do a lot of resilience on the mainland, the homeland, but when you're talking about an island environment like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, those people, they've lost everything, and we need to get them back to some place that they can recover and start rebuilding their lives and their families.
You know, you talked about the size of the evacuation, but on some of these missions, you guys literally have responded in almost 1 hour, where you guys have geared up to try to do that. Give us an example about how you guys ended up responding, for example, in the case of Irma.
Well, in Irma, we were doing our Title 32 training requirements, moving C-130s and moving people in and equipment in and out of Puerto Rico under a training nexus and doing some operations. And then, as we found out when we got down there, the U.S. Navy, with their responsibility for the Caribbean and helping out there, found out a young lady was diabetic in another country, in St. Martin, and needed to be rescued. So they came to us for some help. We had C-130s down there. We went to Northcom and said, hey, can we transfer into a Title 10 authority and use our military capability to go rescue this young lady that was potentially gonna pass away if she didn't get some medical help immediately. So we sent a C-130 with our special tactics team out of Kentucky over to St. Martin. We didn't know the condition of the airport. We were ready to conduct airfield operations to support, and we had a lot of flexibility in a very few people that we sent over there. Come to find out, there was a huge population of Americans over there. In fact, we got a call back that said, hey, from our special tactics team, we've got the young lady, we're ready, we're putting her on the transport, but she's here with 700 of her friends. So now, how do we do that? And we ramped up operations. The U.S. Navy gave us support, Northcom gave us support, and with 5 C-130s from Kentucky, New York, and Puerto Rico, we, over that day, moved almost 1,500 people out of the roughly 3,000 people, Americans, that were on the island that needed to be evacuated.
And that's a positively extraordinary story. Let me just take you back to Maria now. About how many aircraft and people do you have pre-positioned around the region to be able to respond right as that storm finishes up, to be able to, again, do what you said, evacuate people, get gear and stuff in? How many people and airplanes are we talking about?
Well, we're talking in the order of magnitude of 10 to 20 to 30 aircraft are already down in the southeast part of the United States. Those are already part of our normal forces down there, plus we've augmented with other forces. But we've got people in the thousands down there. We've got roughly 10 to 15,000 on standby, ready to go as soon as we found out how devastating Maria is.
how protracted do you have to be? I mean, in many cases, don't you have to just, we were talking to Dewey Everhart, commander of the Air Mobility Command, and he said, look, we had people moving out after the last hurricane, and then we shifted people back in. Is this op-tempo going to be something that you guys can sustain over time, given how, for example, in Texas, it was an all-hands effort where everybody, in the Texas Guard, were, in the Texas Air Guard, were all mobilized for all hands on deck. Can you sustain this kind of pace of operations, given there are going to be more storms in this season?
Absolutely, I think we can. The resilience of Americans in general, but really the resilience that the Guard brings to the table. Not only do we have 105, 106,000 airmen that help with this, we also have almost 350,000 Army Guardsmen that are all jumping in as much as they can to be in the right place at the right time, to do rescue, saving people, helping people get back on their feet.
Let's talk a little bit about modernization. You're here. It's the flagship event of the Air Force every year. Talk to us a little bit about, as you're mapping the modernization future out, working obviously with General Goldfein, but also your reserve counterpart. Talk to us a little bit about what your vision for the Air Guard of the future is.
Well, we're looking at being hand in hand with the Air Force, and I really like the vision of General Goldfein and the Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Wilson, and where they're both going and driving us not only for where we're going to be 1 year, 2 years from here, where we're going to be 5, 10, and 15 years from now is very exciting, because the money we're spending now is the force we're going to have in 2030.
And what are some of the capabilities that are focus areas for you? What are some of your priorities for the force?
Well, some of the priorities I've got is getting us all connected. Not only getting connected on our ideas and how we think about in the joint fight, but getting us connected seamlessly in command and control, electronic systems, our systems of systems that we present to have a very complex offense and defensive capability for any adversary.
Do you think that there's a question always about the Guard now that they're not in that sustained pace of operation, certainly on the Army side, that there's going to be a degradation of skills? From the standpoint of the Air National Guard, you're seamlessly integrated. I mean, it has been a total force for a long time. There were a little bit of ruffled feathers a couple of years ago. Do you feel, from a combat operations standpoint, that the Air Guard remains as seamless with the active duty force as it's historically been?
Oh, very much so. We follow the exact same training standards the active duty does, and we hold the same response time that the active duty is required to respond. Where they're required to respond in 72 hours with the same skill sets they have, we're all on this together.
Let me ask you two more questions. One is a budgetary one. Continuing resolutions are a way of life. Folks have a tendency of looking at it on how that affects the active force. How does it affect your force? How does it affect the Air National Guard, whether it's on the continuing resolution front, but also on the Budget Control Act front? Because it looks like the Senate, for example, has approved a lot more money, at least in its version of the budget, than the caps will allow. So there's a little bit of happy, $640 billion, and then you look at it and you're like, okay, it's capped at $550. What are some of the impacts that you're girding for, whether it's under a CR, but overall from the budget limitations that you've faced over the last couple of years?
Well, one of the things the Guard, and the Air National Guard specifically, is really an ops and maintenance command, an O&M command. We do ops templates right now, and we're providing forces today for today's fight. And in that environment, a CR limits our ops tempo, our training, and how much we can build readiness on a day-to-day basis. But also, there's a great appropriation that the Congress gives to us, and that's our National Guard and Equipment account, our NAGRIA account. And that NAGRIA account gives us money that we can spend on putting new ideas and new systems right off the shelf, commercial off the shelf type programs right into our platforms to upgrade our systems that we have this year and next year. And all of that is restricted when we're in a CR. We don't have that flexibility.
And are you satisfied with where you are on readiness?
Yes, I'm very happy with where we are in readiness. I think we can do a lot more on increasing our lethality if we just get a better budget and a better stability in the funding, and that would help us a lot. But we're ready to go. We have some good training programs and some great capability.
And talk to us one last thing on innovation. Innovation is a big thing. Secretary Mattis is backing that initiative. What does that mean for the Guard? What does that mean for you?
Well, we have a unique niche in innovation in the fact that 2/3 of our workforce is actually employed part-time by the Air National Guard. Full-time, they're out in the community, in business, and living and working in America. And that mindset, that culture, that other ideas on the way to do things is what we can bring to the table, and with great success on innovative ideas.
General Rice, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.